Hello, it's Regina. Welcome back to my haunted library. I'm having a little coffee today because it's a cold day, and this is a good day to read Gothic literature. So, as part of Nonfiction November, I have been digging into some Gothic literature, including Gothic by Fred Boating, a new critical idiom. Now, this is a literary criticism which can be pretty dry, but I found this book to be a really good primer in the introduction to Gothic literature. It's brief, it's concise, and it actually helped me to develop some overriding themes of Gothic literature that I kind of knew, but it helped to synthesize those. And it also gave me a lot of examples of books that some I've read, but some I haven't read. So I'm adding those to my TBR and looking forward to reading them. So, and I did read one this month from this book. So what I wanted to just kind of briefly go over with this book was some of the general forms of the Gothic genre. Now, he does define it as a genre, and in my my first video in my Gothic Sensibility playlist, I questioned whether it was a genre. So after reading this, I really got the idea that it actually is considered like a genre or a subgenre of romantic fiction, as in romanticism from the 1800s, not the romance novels that we would consider today. Okay, so let's go into some of the prevailing forms. And I'm not going to call them tropes because tropes actually has like a negative connotation, like a cliche. But these are forms that you'll find, or devices. He also uses that word, devices, that you find in Gothic literature predominantly. Not every Gothic work of fiction has to have these, but you will find these on some level in your Gothic literature. I love all of these forms. In fact, I noticed that most of my books have some element of this. Not really planned, like I didn't go out and say, oh, I'm going to put all these Gothic elements in my novels. Now, I know that I am aware of some Gothic elements, but I was kind of surprised to be like, oh yeah, I put that in my book, I put that in my story, that's there. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because I have the Gothic sensibility, perhaps, or I watched a lot of Dark Shadows when I was a kid. All right, so let's see what they are. Dark subterranean vaults, decaying abbeys, gloomy forests, jagged mountains, wild scenery inhabited by bandits, persecuted orphans, and malevolent aristocrats. Old castles that later become haunted houses and dark urban landscapes. You see this happening with, just to interject a bit, he does this, talks about how these landscapes start as a physical landscapes, and then they become into, as it gets into the Victorian era, like with Jekyll and Hyde and Dracula, they become urban landscapes, and then as the genre evolves, they become interior emotional landscapes, sometimes both, depending on the story. What else? Oh, I like this idea. And I do have this in my book, Ghost of Dark Hollow, and I was not conscious of it when I did it, but like I said, I watched a lot of Dark Shadows when I was a kid. The sins of the father visiting upon the children, secret paternal crimes. Fall of the House of Usher is a great example of that, and he does get into the American Gothic, and that's interesting too. So this idea of the sins of the father, there's a corruption in the bloodline, and then you see that in Dracula, of course, this idea of like this long history, this ancestry that somehow is corrupted. There's a lot of corruption in Gothic literature. Life-size portraits, sometimes they come to life. Now, I also have a portrait in my second book of my Dark Hollow series, and I think I did kind of do that deliberately. That's one you see in many Gothic stories. The even like in Dark Shadows, Barnabas Collins' portrait is predominant. I don't think it comes to life. I don't remember, it might, but that idea of this old portrait is a common theme or device. Discovered manuscripts, that's always an intriguing idea. The discovered manuscript, the hidden library that contains some kind of secret to a mystery. I mean, who can resist that? That's like the idea of like inside the hidden passageway, you'll find this secret manuscript that's going to yield all this mystery and secrets and all kinds of debauchery. fun, right? And also this idea that I really love, and I also have it in my work a lot, is the double. The double, as in Jekyll and Hyde, or the picture of Dorian Gray, where there is the protagonist, and then there is the, like, he's the good guy, or he's trying to be good, and then you've got his double, who's the bad guy, the corrupted one, the one who's trying to corrupt him. And in the book, in this text, the author talks about how that doubling is actually within us, that our bad self, if you want to call it that, is part of our psychology. So separating into two different characters kind of makes a way of breaking that down and looking at it and making it dramatic. And then also the vampire. The vampire is a character that evolves through Gothic literature. One of the books that he describes as illustrating the sins of the father form is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Now, that book doesn't have a lot of the classic Gothic forms as far as the castle. I mean, Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange are interesting homes, and they're old, but they don't really have that same sense of like the tower or the hidden passage or the subterranean vaults or the secret dungeons or disappearing pictures. There are no supernatural elements. Well, that's not true. It's a ghost story. What am I talking about? There are ghosts in Wuthering Heights, but it has a realism to it where you're kind of put in that realistic setting. But the sins of the father kind of come to roost in Heathcliff. As you remember, Heathcliff is a child who's found on the street by Cathy's father and brings him like a foundling to the house at Wuthering Heights. And he would have raised him kindly, except that he died young, and then he gets subjected to the brother's abuse and is enraged about that. He never gets over his rage over this treatment. So, and he talks about it in the forms of doubling, because in the book, there's Heathcliff's son, and then there's Cathy's daughter. There's these other people from the next generation who are doubles of the first set of characters. So about Wuthering Heights, Fred Botting from this book, I don't know if it's Botting or Boating, it's two T's, so I'm saying Botting. But this is what he writes. The relationship between Heathcliff and Cathy is the most powerful example of doubling, one constituting the other's narcissistic image of his or her own unified self. The powerful desire for unity, however, disturbs all social and familial relations. Heathcliff's desire demands the transgression of all rules and casts him in the figure of a fiend, a devil, and a vampire. I think this is really summed up by the infamous line when Cathy says, "I am Heathcliff." I mean, that is a powerful, powerful statement. And even though she is rejecting him, when she realizes that he is not going to just be in love with her forever, I mean, he is in love with her, but when she realizes that he's not going to just wait around dying of love for her, that he's going to move on with his life and marry her sister-in-law, even though he's not in love with her, Isabella, and he's going to torture her, which he does, Cathy loses her life. She wills herself to die because he is her identity, and without her identity, she cannot live.
And yet, he's more myself than I am. Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. Linton's is as different as frost from fire. My one thought in living is Heathcliff. Ellen. I am Heathcliff.
You know, where Gothic really intersects with Romanticism is this idea of that finding that perfect partner, you know, that, and I think this is a stuff of much fantasy, of course. And, you know, you see this idea of finding your twin flame. I see this on YouTube sometimes, like, I didn't even know what that was until I did a little digging. Whatever your inclinations are, there is this romantic sense that this perfect partner is out there, the one, right? We've been fed that a lot in myths, but I think it comes from a deep psychological need for a reconnection, perhaps to the mother, perhaps to that sense of wanting to make that connection to ourselves even. Maybe that's why we love Gothic literature, those of us who have the Gothic sensibility, is that we love high drama. And it's a lot healthier to read about it or watch a movie than to actually try to live these out. There are many twin flames that have flamed out into cauldrons of hell. So on that note, I'll just say have a happy Thanksgiving, and thanks for stopping by my haunted library, and I'll see you soon. Bye.